For thousands of years, California existed unknown by the civilizations of Europe. Only native peoples lived in her valleys, swam in her ocean and rivers, and lived off her bounty. Beginning in the 1770s, however, while General Washington was leading rebels in the American Revolution, another revolution began in Alta California when Father Junipero Serra and the Spanish Franciscan monks celebrated Mass at Monterey for the first time. Prehistoric California had ended, and modern California began to work her way through Spanish, Mexican, Californio, and eventually American rule with the discovery of gold in 1848. Along the way there would be floods, fires, earthquakes, masses, and murders, all worked to shape the priests, soldiers, and natives as cultures collided. These are the stories of the California missions. Mission San Miguel Arcangel was founded by Father Lawson July 25, 1797, to close the gap between missions San Antonio and San Luis Obispo. The patron saint of the mission is Saint Michael, who is victorious over Lucifer. Unfortunately, on the day we visited, the mission was closed, but we did walk around the exterior. The site for the mission was selected due to the large number of Salinan Native Americans in the area. In 1806, a fire destroyed the temporary church first built on the site. A new church made of tile and adobe with 6-foot-thick walls was completed in 1818.
San Miguel de Arcangel, but it's closed today. Couldn't get them all. You can see this one from the outside, the graveyard.
This cemetery is the final resting place for 2,000 Native Americans and features a bronze statue of Christ on the cross. The mission's bell tower is original to the 1800s. The arcade, with its 12 arches, is also original to the mission. In 1834, the mission was secularized. William Reed and his family lived in the buildings until 1848, when they were murdered by a band of thieves. From 1845 until 1870, the complex was distributed to the Native Americans. The buildings were converted to commercial stores, hotels, offices, and saloons. In 1859, the mission was returned to the Catholic Church, but remained empty. In 1878, church services were reinstated. In 1928, the mission was returned to the Franciscan Padres. In 2003, an earthquake severely damaged the mission, but it reopened in 2009. Today, Mission San Miguel is considered one of the 11 most endangered places by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Mission San Fernando Rey de Espana was founded by Father Francisco Fermín de Lausen, September 8, 1797. It was built to close the gap between the coast and Mission San Gabriel and is the namesake of the San Fernando Valley. The mission is named for Saint Ferdinand, King of Castile from 1217. You can still see his uncropped body at the cathedral in Seville. The figure here is actually of Santo Niño de Atocha from the Missions Museum. In the middle of the quadrangle is an original fountain modeled after one in Cordova, Spain. It was built around 1812 to 1814 and was part of the water system in the San Fernando Mission Garden. 100 years later, that garden was property of Mr. Leslie C. Brand, who donated a part of it to the city of Los Angeles for a park. When the Los Angeles Park Department undertook to restore the Mission Garden in Brand Park, the fountain was presented to Los Angeles by Mr. Brand. It was moved bodily from its former location, a distance of 300 feet, to its present site, July 4, 1922. At its height, the mission had 121,542 acres of land and produced 12,868 bushels of corn and wheat annually. In 1819, the livestock numbered 21,745 animals. Overseeing all of this production was the mayor domo, the foreman of the mission ranch. His home is preserved and on display.
There's the domo's house. Looks like he had a dining room and a kitchen. And there's a baby and a hearth.
The mission is unique for its convento. It is the largest original mission building in California and 2 stories high. It was completed in 1822 after 13 years of construction and boasts 4 feet thick adobe walls. The iconic corridor features 21 Roman-style arches and unusual Moorish arches above the windows and doors of the living quarters for missionaries and visitors. Here is a view of one of the interiors. Let's tour some of the other rooms and displays.
San Fernando Rey de Espana. One of the vestments. Various saints. Virgin Mary. Oh, these guys look too happy. Father Lasuin Memorial.
I mispronounced Father Lawson's name in this clip.
In one of the cells the fathers lived in. The founder of this mission, Padre Lasuin. If you are the bishop, you get your own room. A little fancier than the cells the Padres used. Your own place to pray. Your own wall art. Very nice. As they call the governor's room. More dignitaries can visit. Do a little spinning wheel.
We'll see Mr. Hope again a little later. In addition to the domestic room displays, the convento building also features the mission's wine cellar, which may be the only wine cellar still intact at the missions.
Washed his feet before stamping the grapes. We're making wine, not toe jam. Please use with caution. Oh, all right. So it's about 100 degrees here today, but down here it's maybe 70. It's not that much cooler, but a little cooler. Here's a wine press. Like when I was a kid, this is what we used to press grapes instead of our feet after a while. I like this arch. This building's original to this mission.
Just like I am.
Nice.
There's also this display of the mission's meat smoking room.
Smoking room here. Smoke the meats. Down there. Back to the convent that way.
Most of California's missions are built with adobe bricks. Mission San Fernando has one of the original adobe presses on display, which would have been used to form them.
Tile maker. Now they are making the adobe bricks.
Unique to the mission is its Madonna room. It features hundreds of statues and paintings of the Virgin Mary and was probably originally a prison cell in provincial times.
This is the Madonna room. And they have over 300 Madonnas in here.
The mission's displays on the Native Americans are somewhat lacking, except for its large collection of figures showing Father Sarah guiding a native child towards the ways of the Catholic Church.
Here's the same image. Father taking the Indian boy. There he is again. There he is again. There he is again.
This display seems to celebrate the priests while reducing native culture to being merely childish.
The latest in priest fashion wear. People stole. Nice.
That is not to say the displays on the Native Americans is totally lacking. There is this collection of baskets in the convento and a description of them making meal.
There you go, with a little explanation of making acorn meal, some of the Indian baskets.
The mission also features several original music scores and a large library.
The library. Quite a collection of books. Religious scholars on the walls. Popes. You give your lecture from there.
There were 3 different church buildings as the congregation grew. This is actually an interior model of one of them. The 4th Mission Church you will find today is an exact replica of the building erected between 1804 and 1806. The church is 166 feet long and 35 feet wide. The walls are 7 feet thick at the base and taper to 5 feet thick at the top. The interior furnishings were used in earlier churches. There were 3,188 baptisms, 2,449 burials, and 842 marriages at the mission between 1797 and 1846.
Baptism room here.
Soldiers at the mission were paid in part with food and supplies, which meant that the neophytes had to work harder than they normally would. Soldiers sold liquor and treated the natives as slaves. Leaner times led to insufficient harvests, starvation, and the neophytes fleeing the church. The 16th century gold-leafed reredos was installed in 1991. Pope John Paul II visited the church in September of 1987.
Cemetery?
The Campo Santo is the final resting place for several thousand neophytes and early settlers.
This one's special because it also has Bob Hope Memorial Garden. Bob Hope, you got his own garden here. And his grave is right down there. Bob and Dolores. 2,245 Native Americans interned in this cemetery between 1797 and 1852.
In 1834, the mission was secularized. In the 19th century, it served as a warehouse and hog farm. In 1861, the mission was returned to the church for preservation. After struggles to restore the mission, the Hearst Foundation gave a large gift in the 1940s to make the mission what it is today. In 1971, the San Fernando earthquake, and in 1994, the Northridge earthquake extensively damaged the mission. It has been completely rebuilt using modern techniques.
So there was an earthquake in 1994, the Northridge earthquake. And this building had to go through quite a bit of restoration. Earthquakes have plagued missions for quite a while. This one's got modern touches in it now.
Mission San Fernando Rey de Espana is an important stop along the El Camino Real. Mission San Luis Rey de Francia is also known as the King of Missions and is the 18th in the chain. It is named after King Louis IX, who was a devout Catholic and the only canonized king of France. St. Louis, Missouri is also named after him. The mission was founded on June 12, 1798 by Father Fermin Lausen, who was then the president of the California Missions. The original church had 32 Roman arches and corridor, which formed one side of the mission's quadrangle. Now only 12 remain.
So there's all the arches, and now only 12 of these are left. And these are the arches.
The current church was built in 1815. It is the third church built in this location. San Luis Rey de Francia has a beautiful altar and is the only surviving mission laid out in a cruciform plan. mission cemetery is to the right of the church entrance. Franciscan burial crypts can be found here. As well as beautiful grounds. The mission also has an impressive collection of sacred statues. A unique feature of the church is its octagonal cupola with 144 panes of glass. The dome is made of pine wood and was built in 1829. There is a photo of the original cupola in the mission's museum, as well as hand-lathed columns which were damaged in a fire. The mission's quadrangle was the site of bullfights, and the first Peruvian pepper tree in California was planted there in 1830. Peruvian pepper trees are now called California pepper trees and are prevalent in the state. South of the mission are the sunken gardens, where 2 springs provided water. Also located here are the Lavanderia ruins.
This is the lavanderia, and the fellow in the gift shop was telling us that they would actually put charcoal in this runoff water to purify it before it was sent back out to water the crops. So charcoal filtering 200 years ago. Pretty cool.
In the old lavanderia is an abundance of original adobe tiles. Nearby to the lavanderia are the ruins of the original mission kiln.
This is the kiln at St. Louis Rey, or was the kiln. And we go down the hill and see the lavanderia, which is all that down there.
Father Antonio Peri was the leader of San Luis Rey de Francia from 1799 until 1833. Under his stewardship, San Luis Rey de Francia became the most productive mission in California. The mission's ranches boasted 60,000 head of cattle and raised 13,000 bushels of grain a year. Peri also converted 3,500 members of the native Quechua tribe. These became known as Luiseño Indians, named after the mission and King Louis of France. One Luiseño convert, Pablo Tac, wrote of Father Peri, "The Father is like a king. He has his pages, accolades, major domos, musicians, soldiers, gardens, rancho, and livestock." In 1833, Father Peri's rule and the mission's way of life was coming to an end. Mexican independence from Spain meant Spanish missions were now under Mexican rule. Father Peri is said to have attempted cooperation with Mexican authorities, including Mexico's first governor of California, Pio Pico. Father Peri was ultimately driven from the mission in 1832. He attempted to sail away quietly from San Diego, but 500 neophytes followed and pleaded with him not to leave. He never returned to his mission or to California. After Mexican secularization, the mission was sold in 1834 to private owners. By 1835, most neophytes refused to stay at the mission any longer and declared, "We are free. We do not want to obey. We do not want to work." With no religious services and few natives remaining, the mission fell into disrepair. Mexico's rule did not last long, however. The Mexican-American War was fought from 1846 to 1848, and from 1846 to 1847, the mission was used as a U.S. Army outpost. On March 18, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln signed a document which returned all 21 missions to the Catholic Church and the state of California. Some mission buildings, in poor shape, and 65 acres of land were returned. At Mission San Luis Rey de Francia is a copy of that document with one of the few original signatures of Abraham Lincoln outside of Washington, D.C. In 1892, another extremely important Franciscan, Father Joseph Jeremias O'Keefe, arrived at the mission. Father O'Keefe is credited with directing the efforts to rebuild Mission San Luis Rey de Francia after it had sat abandoned for years. This was not an easy task. In his own words, "The mission church and buildings were in such a state of utter ruin that I almost felt despaired of being able to do enough to put them into habitable condition again." Despite his feelings, Father O'Keefe began his work. With the help of Mexican friars, in 1893, the church was rededicated and religious services began again. Restoration efforts began in 1895 and continue to this day. Today, Mission San Luis Rey de Francia is an impressive example of a California mission. It features outstanding artwork, engaging museum exhibits, and a beautiful campus. Over their church fly the flags of Spain, Mexico, California, and the United States. Each represent a stage of the mission's existence and speak to its rich history. Be sure to exit through the gift shop.